Well, we are on a series all about Esther, the book of Esther. And Esther is such a good book. It is such a good book. And one of the things that I love about the book of Esther is you see this Jewish girl who's a nobody. She's an orphan. And she rises up. God strategically places her into a position, and she becomes the queen of the most powerful empire in the entire world. And what's so interesting is that in the story, throughout the entire book of Esther, God is never named, and yet you see him moving throughout the whole story. He's not mentioned, but yet he's present. I think a lot of times in our life, we've been talking about this over the last couple weeks, we may feel that God is silent, and sometimes we think the silence of God is the absence of God. But that isn't the case. It's not the case in this story. God is very present. And today, I specifically want to answer this question, because this is a question that we often struggle with. Why is God taking so long? Have you guys ever wondered that? And it can be about anything. Maybe you're sitting there and you're like, God, why are you taking so long for me to get this job? God, why are you taking so long for school it keeps going and going? It's never ending. God, why are you taking so long for the Cowboys to win a Super Bowl? Where are you? No, but for real, we wonder sometimes why God takes so long. I remember for me, Lindsay and I, we didn't get married until I was almost 30. And I didn't date a ton before then. Like, I'm just waiting there and I'm like, God, what's taking so long? Come on, maybe some of you guys are in that spot and you're like, yes. What is taking so long, God? Maybe it's a bill. Maybe there's some medical bill that you've been paying the minimum on, and you've been paying the minimum, and it feels like it's just been an eternity. Maybe there's that school debt you've been paying on. Maybe you've been looking for a car that's reliable forever, and you're saying, God, how long am I going to have to drive a car that I got to pray every day before I get in to see if it's going to start? And you're saying, how long? How long? Well, today we're going to answer that very specific question. In the story of Esther, let me catch you up if this is your first week joining with us. So Esther, she married King Xerxes. He was the king of Persia. Persia was the most powerful empire on the face of the planet at this time. Now Xerxes, he was proud, he was impulsive, and he was temperamental. He literally, in one smooth moment, the queen before Esther, he told her, hey, I want you to come in. And she said, nope. And he's like, all right, fine. You're no longer the queen. See ya. And he had this hot temper that would flare up at a moment's notice. Now, last week, we talked about the villain in the story, a guy named Haman. Haman was part of a group of people called the Agagites. They were descendants of the Amalekites, and these were people that have hated God for generations. So this isn't just like, his grandpa was, stiffed by an Israelite. No. This is for hundreds of years, there has been animosity between God's people and Haman's people. And Haman was determined to completely erase God's people from all of history. And he was the number 2 guy in the land, so he had the opportunity to do it. Well, last week we talked about how Haman went before the king. He pitched his idea, hey, let's get rid of all these people, and that he had cast a dice to see which month he should actually enact this. And it landed in the 12th month. And so the plan was set. The edict was issued. All of the Jews were to be attacked and killed in the 12th month of the year. And that's where our story picks up today. Now, Esther, she was living in the harem of the king at that time. And so she wasn't aware of what had happened. Her cousin Mordecai, who she had lived with after her parents were killed, was very aware though. He did hear the edict. And he went and sat by the gates of the city, and he would mourn and wail and put sackcloth and ashes all on his face, weeping. Well, Esther heard about Mordecai mourning. And so she sent word to him, what's going on? What's happening? Why are you all sad? And he told her, Esther, the king just issued the decree. All of our people are to be killed. And then he issued a challenge to her in that moment. He said, Esther, could you go before the king on our behalf? And Esther, she says, cousin, you don't understand what you're asking. I'm not allowed to go. I can't, it's not like you and I that we could just walk in and be like, hey, we need to talk about something. No. She can't go before the king unless she's summoned. And let's remember, the last queen, he summoned her and she didn't come, so he got rid of her. So now if Esther comes and he didn't summon her, he could get rid of her too. Her life, her very life is on the line in this moment. But Mordecai keeps encouraging her, keeps challenging her, please. In fact, we have his words written in Esther chapter 4. When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And then here's the most famous line in the entire book, one of the most famous lines in all of Scripture. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Mordecai, in this moment, he says, Esther, what if God has been setting the stage? What if God's been working and doing all this stuff, putting you into this position for this moment? And then, listen to what Esther says. Verse 15, Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. Go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. My first thought is this: God's timing often begins with delays. We want things on our time. We hate waiting. When the microwave still says 10 seconds, we're like, oh, come on, 10 more seconds. Why? Because I want it now. I don't want to wait. Waiting is hard. But let me say this, with God, expect delays. You know, when you're driving down the road and there's going to be construction and they'll put up signs and they'll be like, construction, May 12th, expect delays. Let me just go on and tell you, if you are serving God, expect delays. And let me tell you why. Because you're expecting God to move in your timing, which means that you think you're in control. But let me tell you what, you're not in control. God's in control. And so the first thing that you need to understand is that God is the one who is in charge, not you. And he doesn't have to work in your timing. So if you think God has to provide the job in this amount of time, if you think God has to heal in this much amount of time, if you think God is going to bring the spouse in this much amount of time, expect delays. Why? Because you're not the boss. And God is the boss. God is in control, and you need to surrender to him. Alignment with God begins with surrender. If we want to be aligned with God, we have to surrender to God. And what I've realized is that delays they reveal who's in control. Because it's not us, it's God. I love that Mordecai even acknowledges this with Esther. He's like, look, you're not in control, Esther. If you don't do this, God's gonna save us some way. I know he's gonna do, he cares about his people, he loves us. He's gonna provide a way out, but it could be you. And if we wanna be a part of God's plan, we have to surrender to God and say, okay, God, you are in control. I think a lot of time we think God's slow, but God's not slow. He's setting the stage. All the pieces are moving into place, and it's gonna happen at just the right time. Delays create space for preparation. Esther wasn't ready. The people weren't ready. And so what were they gonna do? They were gonna fast for 3 days. And I think it's interesting too, the days that they were going to fast. So the king's edict was issued on the 13th of Nisan. That was the month of their calendar. Well, the 14th of Nisan is the beginning of Passover. And so the people would normally have this big, huge festival. It was the biggest holiday in all of the Jewish faith. And they would have days and days of feasting and celebrations. And instead, Esther says, we're going to press pause on those celebrations this year. And we are going to fast and pray. And we are going to seek God. God did it before. We're reminded that he rescued people before coming up out of Egypt. And so we're gonna pray that God does it again. And I think sometimes for us, when we're praying, we're expecting God to do it on our time, but God's denial of your timing doesn't mean that God doesn't care. It doesn't mean that God doesn't see anything. Delay doesn't mean denial. It may be God's way of deepening your dependence on him. Your calling is on the other side of your comfort zone. And in this season, it would have been very comfortable for Esther to just say, you know what? I kind of got a good life. Like, let's be honest. I'm the queen. I have whatever I want. I just went through like a year of beauty or 6 months of beauty treatments. I look good. Everything I could need is at my fingertips. But she said, no, I'm going to step out of my comfort zone into the calling that God has. And it took some time. It wasn't instant. There was going to be a little delay. And again, for you, there might be a bit of a delay, but that's okay. A delay does not mean a denial. So what happens next? Well then, after 3 days of everybody fasting, praying, seeking God, finally the day comes. The day that Esther is going to go to the king. And again, just like she said, if I perish, I perish. And we have exactly what happened. Listen, in Esther chapter 5, beginning in verse 1, on the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace in front of the king's hall. I could just picture her right before she walks in. But I don't think she went in fearful. I think she went in with confidence. Why? Because she knew God was with her. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the hall facing the entrance. When he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased with her. And he held out the gold scepter which was in her hand. If the king didn't extend the gold scepter, she would have been killed on the spot. But the king in this moment, instead of calling the guards to go and kill her, he extends the scepter and he spares her life. So Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. Then the king asked, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be given to you." Now here in this moment, Esther has a chance. She could immediately spit out, "King, you don't understand. Haman, he's trying to kill all of the people. He's trying to do this. But Esther knows today, right in this moment, the timing still isn't right. If it pleases the king, replied Esther, let the king, together with Haman, come today to a banquet I have prepared for him. Again, when we read this story, we're like, oh, this is perfect. The king just gave her the blank check. What do you want? I'll do it. But she has discernment and knows the timing still isn't right. God's timing is perfect when you align with his strategy. A lot of times we try to do our strategy. Well, God, this is how I think things should be. But that might not be God's plan. And I'll tell you what, I think the most important thing about prayer, a lot of times, this wasn't in my notes, but I'm just going to throw it out there. When I'm praying with people, I can often hear their relationship with God in what they're praying. Because what I hear is a lot of times people, it starts, the prayers are selfish prayers. You know, God, heal me. Do this in my life. And again, I'm not saying those are bad prayers. I'm not saying don't pray those prayers, okay? Please hear me. If you're sick, yes, ask God to heal you. And then I can tell when people take a deeper step. And it's a prayer of saying, God, move in this other person. God, I'm praying for my enemies. I'm praying for this person over here. And then there's an even deeper level of commitment. When I hear people say, God, what are you wanting to do? God, how are you wanting to use me? God, I don't want my will to be done. I want your will to be done. And you see, this is the prayer that when Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, that he was praying. He was saying, God, not my will. Because Jesus' will, he didn't want to go to the cross, but he was willing to do it if it was God's will. And he said, so God, I want your will in my life. And when we surrender to God's will, oh my goodness, when you align yourself with God's strategy for your life, there's no better place. Alignment begins with surrender, not control. Because we want to control the situation. We want to control every aspect, all the details. And I know a lot of people, they'll say, well, I'm a control freak. I'm a planner. Man, most of us are. Most of us are control freaks. Most of us, we like to know what the plan is. I don't like stepping out in faith any more than you do. But when you can step out in faith and say, God, I'm trusting you. I promise when you step out in faith and it's in alignment with God's plan, with his will, with his strategy for your life, you will not be disappointed. Esther wasn't trying to manipulate the moment. I think a lot of times we'll do that. We'll try to manipulate a situation for this is how God, I believe tonight at my small group, I'm gonna meet the girl that I'm gonna marry. And it also just so happens that I forgot to invite everybody except for one person. And she's really cute. And we try, man, we try to manipulate stuff. God sees through that. No. God, I trust you. I trust you. Again, when I was in that spot, when I'm praying and I'm like, Lord, what are you wanting to do? Lord, where's this spouse? I'm waiting. God's like, well, she's in another state. And I'm doing things in both of you. So just wait. Just wait. God will delay your request until the setup is complete. You know, as I look back in those moments, there's things God was still doing inside of me. There's things God was still doing inside of Lindsay in that moment. And maybe there's things that God is still doing inside of you for whatever that thing is that you're waiting on. Maybe there's something that the preparation's not done. You think it is. Are you kidding me? I would have been in that moment, God, I'm ready. Lord, come on, bring this wife, let's go. But God's like, you're not ready. Yes, I am. No, you're not. I need you to be patient. I'm working on you. I'm working on her. And when the timing is right, everything's gonna align just perfectly. So wait patiently on the Lord. I love that Esther, she invites the king to a banquet, but then she's still waiting to make the request. You know, it wasn't in that moment that she made the request. She's still waiting. Still, why? The timing wasn't right. God's in the details. God's in the timing. And between banquets, in fact, she invites him to a banquet. He comes, and then she invites him to another banquet. Because after the first banquet, the timing still wasn't right. And what's crazy, and we're going to get to this, in between these two banquets, God was doing something supernatural. Something that only God can do. In that in-between time, in that waiting period, God was prepping, God was preparing. But Esther had discernment in that moment. And discernment is doing the right thing at the right time. The right thing at the right time. I think sometimes, maybe your kid is far off from God, and you're like, I'm going to tell him. I'm going to tell him. And there might be a time you need to tell him. But you need to tell him in God's time, not your time. At the right time, God's going to open those doors. God's going to make those conversations happen at the right time. The right thing at the wrong time will always bring the wrong outcome. It may be the right person at the wrong time. That's the wrong person. It's the wrong outcome is going to happen if you find the right person and it's still the wrong time. So, what happens next? Well, I mentioned that right after this first banquet, something happens. You see Haman, he goes out through the city, and he's walking through the city. He sees Mordecai, and all the people would kneel down and bow down and honor Haman, except for Mordecai. He's already stood up when everybody else was kneeling down, and it was just irking Haman. And once again, Mordecai is standing there with his arms crossed, just shaking his head. Nope, not gonna do it, not gonna do it. And Haman walks by, and he's so frustrated. He can't stand this guy. So he goes home and he's like, what am I gonna do? I know, I'm gonna create a 75-foot spike, and I'm gonna spear him through this spike, and his body's gonna be dangling up in the air. That'll show them all. That's how I'm gonna get it. You know what? I'm not gonna wait one more moment. Even though it's the middle of the night, I'm gonna go to the king right now. And so Haman makes his way to the palace to go talk to the king in that moment. And then it's crazy because the king, it says in chapter 6, beginning in verse 1, that night the king could not sleep. So he ordered the book of the Chronicles, the record of his reign, to be brought in and read to him. It was found recorded there that Mordecai had exposed Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, who had conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. So in this moment, Haman's on his way to talk to the king about killing Mordecai. The king can't sleep. He's got insomnia this night. And he turns and he's like, hey, can you read like from my diary? Like, I just want to hear all how great I am and all the things that happened. And so this person opens up, starts reading. Oh, and then the person, Mordecai, he saved your life because he heard about the plot, and the men who were trying to kill you were captured and executed. And then it says in verse 3, the king asks, what honor and recognition has Mordecai received for this? The king asked. Nothing has been done for him, the attendants answered. So now again, painting the picture, Haman's on his way in the middle of the night to come talk to the king about impaling Mordecai on a 75-foot spike. The king can't sleep, has them read from his diary. They happen to read that night about Mordecai saving the king's life. Again, you think God's not moving in this book? These aren't coincidences. These are acts of God. This shows the sovereignty of God in this story. Yes, God's name might not be named, but you see his hand moving. And so then Haman comes in. And it's so funny. Haman enters, and the king, I could just picture him. Haman, good. I was needing to ask somebody something. The king asks them, what should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Now Haman is prideful, and immediately he starts thinking, me? The king wants to honor me? Well, king, if you want to honor somebody, whoever this person could be, you should put royal robes on them. You should have a horse be brought, a royal horse, a brand new royal horse with a crest on its head. And then I want someone leading me, this person through the streets shouting, this is what the king does to those he wants to honor. And I can picture this. This is Haman's dream, okay? He's been thinking about this. This isn't the first, he spits it out without hesitation, okay? I could picture him sitting there, in his house, sitting there thinking, oh, this would be so cool if the king did this. So, he's, yes, king, this is what should be done. And the king in that moment, I like it. Perfect. Do everything that you have said for Mordecai the Jew. And if there is a picture that I could take in the Bible of anybody's face, it would be Haman's face in that moment for Mordecai, the Jew. What? Excuse me, what? You want me to lead Mordecai? The guy I'm about to impale, the guy, Mordecai, I'm leading him? And so Haman, with this horse following behind him, starts to move through the city streets with Mordecai. And God is honoring Mordecai in that moment. I love this thought because God can flip the script in a single night. Here, it looks like there is a spike, there is a pole that has Mordecai's name on it, and instead, God's like, no. He's not getting impaled on that. Instead, he's going to be honored. In fact, according to the Jewish teachings in the Midrash, there's this crazy story that Haman's daughter heard about what had happened, but she apparently had gotten it switched, and in her mind, Mordecai was leading her dad. And so she was like, oh, I'm going to actually go and dishonor Mordecai. And so again, this is just Jewish legend, but they say that she took a big, huge bucket of toilet water, and right as they were walking by, she dumped it on the person leading the horse. And she's like, perfect. Take this, Mordecai. No, as the toilet water descends on her own father. And according to Jewish legend, she literally was so embarrassed in that moment, she jumped from where she was and killed herself. And so here in this moment, in one night, God flipped the switch. Here, Haman is trying to dishonor and destroy Mordecai's family, and God's like, oh, no, I'm going to flip this. I'm going to actually destroy your family. God can flip the switch, flip everything in a single night. What looks like coincidence is often just providence. I think so many times we think that God's gonna move in this big, huge moment, and what I've seen in my personal life, more often than not, it's the small details. God, I'm struggling with finances. Lord, I need your help. God, I trust you. And then you get a refund check from something. Oh, I wasn't expecting that. Oh, my taxes weren't as bad. Wow. In fact, I heard this story one time. This guy, he was on a roof, and he was putting shingles on a roof, and he started to slide off the roof, and he's reaching for anything to grab onto, and he's like, God, help me. And then his foot got caught on a nail. And he's like, never mind, God, this nail caught me. And it sounds so silly, but we do the same thing. God's like, I do have you. Look what I've done. Look what I did in the story of Esther. I'm faithful. I am always faithful. It's not a coincidence that check arrived. It's my divine providence. Why? Because I'm faithful. And the enemy, he's got plans to destroy you. We talked about that last week. He's coming. He's got a game plan to take you down. But the enemy's plan will always fall under God's purpose. Here, this was all, the enemy's got a plan. We got a spike and we've got Mordecai's name on it. This is perfect. But nope, that plan has to fall under God's purpose and God's plan. The enemy does not get the final say, which then leads to the last part of Scripture. So the final banquet takes place. The king is sitting there with Esther and with Haman. And the king asks Esther what she wants. And in chapter 7, verse 3, it says this: Then Queen Esther answered, "If I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition, and spare my people. This is my request, for I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated." If we had just been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king. And then I picture the king in this moment. Who's trying to kill my queen? And I can just picture Esther. It's Haman. What? No, I would never. The king, again, what do we say he has? He's got a temper. He literally in this moment, he's so filled with rage, he leaves. He darts out, and Haman turns to Esther. Esther, you got to know, I didn't know you were a Jew. I hate the Jews, yes, but not you. You're different. Like, please, and he grabs her. And he's holding on to her, begging and pleading for his life. You don't understand, Esther, and in that moment, as he's holding on, grabbing her, the king walks back into the room. And the king, are you going to attack my wife in my own house? Guards, seize him. What should we do to Haman? And one of the attendants literally just casually throws this out. There's a 75-foot spike right outside the wall. And Haman, not Mordecai, was the one impaled on the spike. My last thought is this: obedience brings victory. Because Esther was obedient, God brought about the victory. And it wasn't just a victory for Esther. It wasn't just a victory for Esther and her family. It was a victory for all the people. When we are obedient, God brings victory. Obedience, again, it aligns us with God's will. It aligns us with God's plan. Esther was obedient. She did her part. She fasted, she prayed, she went in courageously into the king, risking her life, and God did his part. God showed up, he protected, he preserved, and God will continue to do the same thing for you. Whatever situation you're going through, whatever you're waiting on, I promise you, God is faithful. He will do his part. Obedience allows God to finish what he started. Again, we said this last week. The story's not over. You're in the middle. The story of God's healing, the story of God's provision, the story of God's protection, it's not over. You're just in the middle. So just wait patiently. Victory doesn't come from control. It comes from surrender. You know, I think it's really cool too. So it says that Esther went before the king, and it says that she had fasted for 3 days beforehand. And I mentioned that this took place over the Passover, days that would have normally been filled with joyous food and dinners and all these different preparations and festivities, and instead the people fasted and prayed. And then 3 days afterwards, she goes in to the king to try to save her people. And when you fast forward several hundred years into Scripture, you're going to see that Jesus, on Passover, he died. And then 3 days later, he rose up as the king to save all the people. God's timing is strategic. You hear, I didn't even realize that until I was studying this week. And now I'm like, it's so fitting. It's so perfect. How and when and where and what God does. I look at my own life. I wasn't ready before then, before Lindsay came in. I thought I was ready to be married. I wasn't ready until God said, all right, now is the time. And it starts with us surrendering to God, being obedient to God, and giving up control to Him.